Good morning. We're going to go ahead and bring the Assembly Appropriations Committee to order. We don't have a quorum yet, so I urge our members and colleagues to come down so that we may establish a quorum. In the meantime, we will start as a subcommittee, and with that, we will hear our first author, Mariko Yamada. Come on up. Good morning, Ms. Yamada. You're presenting on 3 bills that are suspense candidates.
Yes, actually, Mr. Chairman, I am presenting only on 2.
There you go.
Apologize. Thank you very much. I am actually presenting only on 2 this morning.
Okay, what's your pleasure?
I will be presenting on AB 1593 and AB 1788.
Very good.
So may I begin?
The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman and members. Well, good morning. I'm pleased to present AB 1593, which is a bill that would exempt 2 very specific adult day health centers that are co-located with 2 veterans facilities that are already built. I have to say that the analysis indicates that these facilities are still under construction, and that is not correct. These facilities are built. In fact, I had the privilege of visiting one of them during the grand opening. What these 2 veterans adult day health centers will do will be provide services to our returning veterans who will already be in the facilities, in other sections of the facilities. Will allow these veterans to participate in day treatment, activities that would reduce their likelihood of risking a higher level of care. A statewide moratorium on adult day health centers has been in effect since 2004, and this we understand there are reasons for that exemption. However, these are very special and specific adult day health centers that we believe will save the state money, because right now these clients are being served without the federal drawdown that we would be eligible for if these adult day health centers were exempted from the statewide moratorium. And with me I have witnesses that I believe can illuminate on these important issues. May I turn to them now?
Absolutely. Witnesses in support?
My name is Jennifer Gabalis. I'm with the California Association for Adult Day Services. CADS is pleased to sponsor AB 1593. As Ms. Yamada stated, this bill creates an exemption to the ADHC moratorium on Medi-Cal certification to permit 2 ADHCs operated by the California Department of Veterans Affairs to become eligible for Medi-Cal reimbursement, which is matched by the federal government. The Department of Veterans Affairs began constructing these campuses in 2004. Funding came from 3 sources: general obligation bonds, revenue bonds, and a grant from the United States Department of Veterans Affairs State Homes Grant Program. The campuses built with these funds include multi-level housing and medical care. ADHC is a key part of their planned care continuum. The inability to certify these ADHCs is a key component of these publicly funded facilities is an unintended consequence of the ADHC moratorium. We respectfully ask for your support to exempt these facilities.
Kristen Heyman on behalf of Aging Services of California. Adult day health care is a reasonable, cost-effective alternative to institutionalization. Therefore, we ask for your aye vote. Thank you.
Very good. Any additional witnesses in support? Witnesses in opposition? Seeing and hearing none. Department of Finance, do you have a file on this?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, Rob Schladel with the Department of Finance. We have an opposed position on this bill because the governor's budget does propose to eliminate ADHC as a Medi-Cal benefit. The cost, however, is only $25,000 general fund per year.
Very good. Thank you for the presentation, Ms. Yamada, and thank you for pointing out the information about the 2 facilities. And the item still remains a suspense item, but thank you for your presentation, and we'll take a good look at it.
Thank you.
AB 1788?
Yes, thank you for the opportunity to present AB 1788, which is a flood protection for disadvantaged communities bill. Members, what this bill will do will not increase the pool of money or the costs for these projects, but will simply recalculate the formula for eligibility for these bond funds. And right now, what we have in California is what I would refer to as a situation of frogs jumping halfway to the wall. If we do not do something about reformulating the eligibility for certain flood monies, there are certain communities that will never be able to qualify for these bond funds. Right now, our disadvantaged communities are, frankly, they're disadvantaged in many respects. And the current formula by which these bond funds can be applied actually have established a structural barrier for small communities to become eligible for these bond funds. So with that, I know that the analysis indicates that there will be millions of dollars of cost to the state. Actually, the monies are already in the Prop 1E bond funding category. It's simply reformulating the eligibility so that small communities may be eligible to apply. And with that, I ask for an aye vote.
Very good. Witnesses in support?
Mr. Chairman, Madam Vice Chair, other members of the committee, Paul Yoder here today on behalf of the Delta Counties Coalition in support of Assemblymember Yamada's bill. I think several members of the committee know what it's like to represent disadvantaged communities. The Assemblymember's right about cost. There would be no additional cost to the state, and I'd urge your favorable consideration. I vote. Thank you.
Thank you.
Very good. Any additional witnesses in support?
Nope.
Any witnesses in opposition? Seeing and hearing none. Department of Finance, do you have a file?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. We have an opposed position on this bill. The reason is that by providing a larger state share, the state would be able, with existing funds, to fund fewer flood control projects. So in that respect, we would prefer to stick with the original existing matching ratio.
Very good. Ms. Yamada, this item will remain on suspense, but we will take a look at the eligibility issues. Thank you for waiving presentation on AB 1886, and with that, I think we're done. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Ing. Morning, sir.
Morning, Mr. Chair, and good morning, members.
Looks like you're presenting on suspense candidate. Are you doing 1737 and 1899, or is it just?
We're going to waive 1737, Mr. Chair, and just present on 1899.
Very good. Thank you, sir. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Very briefly, AB 1899 is a simple bill. What it says is that every time the state of California contracts out the billions of dollars of services, that people of California and all our agencies will know about it. It's a practice that is already occurring in Alaska, Texas, Missouri, Kansas, and the federal government.
Mr. Ing, excuse me for a second. We seem to have a quorum, so we're going to go ahead and establish that. Madam Secretary, please call the roll.
Fuentes.
Here.
Conway. Here. Amiano.
Aye. Here.
Oh, here.
Bradford. Calderon. Cotto. Davis. De Leon. Hall. Harkey. Miller. Nielsen. Norby. Skinner. Solario. Torlixon. Torrico.
Very good. We have a quorum. Mr. Ing, I apologize for interrupting you. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, sir, and members. This bill is a transparency bill. It simply mirrors the governor's excellent existing executive orders on transparency. I just want to make 2 points. I want to clarify that the first version of the analysis referenced the reporting of contracts over $5,000 was not included in the executive order. However, we have clarified that it was included in a separate executive order, S0809, and it's now reflected in the new analysis. I understand the measure is a suspense candidate. However, I do have amendments suggested by the Department of General Services that would make the cost minor and absorbable. I have sponsors here to make comments.
Stephanie Burr with SCIU Local 1000. We're the sponsor of the measure. This measure is important because we want to make sure that the public knows what the state is spending its money on. This is an important transparency measure, and we ask for your support when it comes up in front of you when you look at the suspense file.
Very good. Any additional witnesses in support? How about in opposition? Seeing and hearing none. Department of Finance, do you have a file?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, we do have a concern from the Department of General Services regarding cost on this measure as currently written. Apparently, the measure would require the entire verbiage of contracts to be posted on the website. They indicate that currently the basic information on each contract is there, and that if someone's interested in a particular contract, they can contact the contracting agency and get the balance of the information.
If I could respond to that, the amendments indicate that only summaries will be posted on the main website, and if they want more information, they can get the details on a successor website. So therefore, that's why the costs remain minor and absorbable. Respectfully request an aye vote.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Ng. Looking forward to reviewing your amendments to help bring that bill to within the parameters of our fiscal thresholds here. Thank you for your presentation. That will remain on suspense.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Looking for our next author, Mr. Bell. Good morning, sir.
Mr. Chairman, I'm only presenting on one bill today. That's AB 2204.
Thank you for that. The floor is yours.
Mr. Chairman, the population of people with developmental disabilities served by our regional centers is diverse as the state itself. The Department of Developmental Services is responsible for ensuring the needs of all people with developmental disabilities in the state are met, and therefore making policy and fiscal decisions. It's vital that the Department of Developmental Services considers and takes into account the needs and concerns of all segments of the developmental disabilities community. AB 2204 simply states that when the DDS is required to convene or consult with stakeholder groups under the Latterman Act, they must consider the state's diversity in ethnicity, socioeconomic level, geography, sexual orientation, and gender identity. AB 2204 does not establish targets or quotas. It merely requires the department use its best efforts to include stakeholder groups that collectively reflect the interest of the state's diverse population. Explicitly including this language in the Latterman Act will establish a standard and will let the communities know that their voices will be heard in discussions of fiscal policy issues that impact their lives and the lives of their children. As noted in the staff analysis, there are at most minor absorbable costs with this bill. It was very successful, these stakeholder groups, in determining the budget cuts for the department last year. They created a stakeholder group, a lot of meetings, determined what the priorities were, came up with some recommendations for the budget cuts, and presented to the legislature, which were unanimously accepted. I think the stakeholder process is a good one. We've got to make sure it has a diverse set of members, and I urge an aye vote.
Very good. Thank you. Do you have any witnesses in support?
Yes.
Good morning. My name is Soane Ban. I'm with Disability Rights California in strong support of this bill. Important decisions are made at these stakeholder meetings and stakeholder processes, and we want to make sure that the diverse voice of people with developmental disabilities in California, the population of people with developmental disability in California now is, the minorities are now the majorities. And this bill ensures a process that allows these voices to be heard. Oftentimes, it takes some resources to come to these stakeholder meetings. And with this being in statute, it allows a means for the department to ensure that there's a process in place to make sure that these diverse voices are heard. So again, with Disability Rights California in strong support of this bill, and we urge support as well from the committee members.
Do we have any additional witnesses in support or in opposition? Mr. Solorio, you have a question?
Just wanted to move the bill.
Very good. The bill's been moved. Looking for a second.
Second.
Bill's been seconded. Mr. Norby, you have a question?
Yes. If minorities are now a majority, when will the term minority itself be obsolete? That's, I guess, a rhetorical question, but hopefully soon.
I don't have that word in my bill, Mr.
Oh,
Norby,
good,
so.
good. It was used by one of your supporters. The issue I have with any diversity bills is that the state is so diverse that in the attempt to assure diversity, you break people into categories which are very arbitrary and fail to reflect even more diversity. I've got one biological son who's half Norwegian, half Chinese, and he's been being asked all his life, you know, which category does he fit in. He's now a sophomore at SC, and he joined a HAPA club, which represents both. I've got three new stepchildren whose mother was born in Honduras, and their biological father is, I'm not even sure what he was. I'm the stepdad now. And so inevitably these, in the name of diversity, regard categorizing people into purely arbitrary categories, which are becoming more and more problematic. And that's my concern, and has been my concern for years with programs like this. Thank you.
Very good. And any additional questions or comments, members? Very good. Department of Finance, do you have a file on this?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, we have minor and absorbable costs for this.
Very good. As a result, this bill does have a do pass recommendation. It's been moved by Mr. Solorio, seconded by Mr. Cotto. Madam Secretary, Mr. Bill, would you like to close?
No, Mr. Chairman, I urge I vote on this bill.
Very good. Madam Secretary, this is going to go out on a B roll call. Thank you very much. Let's see. Mr. Monning. Good morning. You're presenting on AB 1956.
Yes, Mr. Chair. Thank you. Members, good morning. This bill goes to expanding some of the provisions on condor feeding sites. The California condor is listed as a federal and state endangered species and only eats the remains of dead animals. Livestock operations have provided a food source for free-ranging condors for hundreds of years. Dead livestock and road-killed wildlife offer an ample food supply for condors, but are often unavailable to free-ranging California condors due to existing collection and disposal procedures. AB 1956 provides guidelines stating that if the Department of Fish and Game enters into an MOU for the purposes of condor recovery efforts, then the MOU shall be consistent with feeding and location guidelines. The bill requires the Department of Fish and Game to update any MOU that has been in effect prior to January 1st, 2011 with provisions consistent with AB 1956. I could go on, Mr. Chair, but maybe I'll stop there and ask for your support and your aye vote, and we'll be glad to answer any questions.
Thank you. Doing it for the condors, Mr. Monning. Do we have any witnesses in support? In opposition? Department of Finance, do we have a file?
Yes, we have a cost estimate of $125,000 for the bill.
Very good. The bill has been moved and seconded. This bill is out on an A roll call. Congratulations, Mr. Monning.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, members.
Less Ms. Harkey. Mr. Gaines. Moved and seconded it, but let's pick the people. The floor is yours, sir. You're presenting today on, looks like 1995.
That's right. Yeah, AB 1995 is simply an opportunity for folks who have received a hunting or fishing license and lost it. Gives them the ability to go online, replace it for a much reduced fee. Currently, the license is $40. You can go online and replace it for $9. Stamps cost $3 instead of larger amounts. And just an opportunity to do it online, save some money for folks that have lost their hunting or fishing licenses.
Very good. Do you have any witnesses in support?
Matt Robinson with the Department of Fish and Game. We're the sponsors of the bill.
Very good. Do you think you can do a little bit more on the hyperlinks? Because it's a pretty boring page. I mean, that's where I get my fishing license. Any witnesses in opposition? Maybe have a bass jumping out. Department of Finance, do we have a file?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, we have no significant costs for this.
Very good. Members looking for a motion to move the bill as recommended, do pass?
Move the bill.
Very good. The bill has been moved and seconded. Very good. Members, this bill is out on a roll call.
Great. Wonderful.
Very good.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Mr. Calderon, would you like to present your resolution as we wait for members?
Absolutely, Mr. Chair.
And we are waiting. I know that Ms. Evans will probably have somebody present for her because she's ill, but we are looking for Mr. Della Torre, Mr. Hagman, Mr. Hill, and Mr. Mendoza. Mr. Majority Leader, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And members, as you may or may not know, the Montebello in my district is the site of the Armenian Martyrs Memorial Monument. It was built in 1960. It is the only monument in the state and one of the most distinguished in the country, acknowledging the Armenian genocide of 1915. What this measure does is it requests Caltrans to erect a sign on State Route 60, and that will be on the off-ramp to direct people to that monument. This will cost no money because Caltrans is directed not to do anything until private funds have been produced to pay for all costs. Ask for an aye vote.
Very good, Mr. Calderon. Do you have any witnesses in support of the resolution or in opposition? Clearly, we don't have any. Very important measure, members. Very good. The bill's been moved by Ms. Skinner, seconded by Mr. Cotto. This measure is out on a roll call. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members.
Again, we're looking for authors. Looking for Mr. De La Torre, Mr. Hagman, Mr. Hill, and Mr. Mendoza. See Mr. Hagman in the room. Thank you, Mr. Hagman. Yes, Mr. Hagman, the floor is yours. It looks like you've got one suspense item, 1988.
Is that the one you want me to present on?
Would rather that you present on the ones that you want to make the case for. I mean, it's a
I have one on consent, or at least a proposed consent, and then the other one.
Yeah, 1675 is consent as amended, and we'd be happy to not hear that unless you really need to.
Nope.
And the same thing goes for your suspense item, but if you'd like to make the case on 1988, we'll entertain that as well.
I appreciate that, Mr. Chair, and thank you, members. 1988 is a bill that we all saw last year. And what it is it's a district bill for Chino Valley Unified School District, who on a self-auditing found out that on their minimum day schedule, 2 elementary schools were short, one by 5 minutes and one by 10 minutes of their actual total number of minutes of education for that particular day. They did put the whole 54,000 minutes in, and they were able to complete their successful participation in the education process there, but they were off by those minutes. And under state law, those days would need to be replaced. Now, they didn't realize that it happened until in the year after they did the self-audit. And so now at this point, the school district is looking at to follow the state current law for this, replacing 34 days for all 4th, 5th, and 6th graders for a period of 2 years at a great cost to the local school district. These are 2 schools that are doing well in the district. I don't have the exact numbers API score in front of me, but one of them is very high and another one's decent. And they have taken measures to rectify this completely. This bill that was passed out unanimously out of this House last year would cut down the 34 days to a period of 7 days. To replace with all those students from 4th, 5th, and 6th graders for a period of 2 years. So I respectfully ask you, I vote. I believe we had support on this from the CTA. I believe that it went through without any objections last year up to the Senate Appropriations. There is a note on the analysis of fiscal impact, but I want us to really think, are we going to go back and request the school district to really pay back $7.5 million? That's what it's going to cost them, even though all the teachers got paid, all the personnel got paid, the students got all of their education. And for myself, who have 2 students about those ages, or my kids, I'm sorry, I know from firsthand being a PTA dad for 7 years, not every minute of every day of education is spent on education. We have some downtime and such, so I don't think the students really missed out anything at all. Respectfully ask for your aye vote and not to put on suspense.
Very good. The item is a candidate for suspense. Do you have any witnesses in support?
Not at this time.
Or in opposition? Department of Finance, do you have a file on this?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. The amount of funds at issue, Assemblyman indicated, is $7.6 million. I think our only concern here is a fiscal policy issue of providing, in a unique circumstance, an exemption from state rules and regulations.
Very good. Mr. Hagman, the item is a suspense item, but you and I have talked a little bit about the issue. I absolutely value your opinion on fully funding education, so this is an important bill to me as well. Let us work together and see what we can do to move this thing along.
I appreciate it.
Great. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
The item will remain in suspense. Third and last try for authors. Mr. De La Torre, Mr. Hill, and Mr. Mendoza. We'll give it a few minutes and then we'll adjourn. He's not on the committee, right? No, so we can't get his vote. Very good.
Mr. F. sat on the sergeant's call.
Let me see.
He just has one. The other one's going to suspense.
Mr. Mendoza, you have two bills. Which one would you like to present on?
I would like to present on AB 1673, Adult Education Study.
Very good. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Members, I'm here to present AB 1673. AB 1673 requires that the Legislative Analyst Office to analyze specific policy areas related to adult education programs and to report this information to the legislature by January 1st of 2012. In 2008, 178,000 adults participated in career tech education programs throughout the adult education system. Of these, over 72,000 adult students were economically disadvantaged and over 14,000 were limited English proficient. These numbers show the important role of adult education programs that play in our local workforce development. But through the drastic budget cuts, we feel that we need to do a study bill to ensure that when we revisit these cuts in about 2 years, we need to have the information ready for us to make that decision again and see if we're gonna what kind of harm we put in these programs. With that, I do have some people here that want to speak in favor of this bill, and hoping that you can give us some time for that.
Very good. First witness.
Mr. Chairman, members, Jeff Frost, representing the California Council for Adult Education. We are the sponsor of the bill. As Mr. Mendoza said, the flexibility has at least anecdotally dramatically impacted adult education programs. Our interest is in determining, as we get closer to the end of flexibility, the impacts of those programs, what adult education ought to be restructured as in terms of coming out of the flexibility. Our hope is that we will be able to look to the budget, possibly federal funds, to be able to pay for this study, and we're in support of the bill.
Terry Burns on behalf of the California Association of Adult Education Administrators. We're seeing several of these adult education programs closed or reduced this year, many, many more next year. We're very concerned that these programs will just be completely eliminated through the process as we go. We're looking at the end of categorical flexibility and saying what's going to happen with this population. We are going to have individuals who do not have high school diplomas. We are going to have individuals who do not have workforce training. And we need to make a policy decision how we're going to treat those individuals and what is our plan to work with those folks and make them productive members of our society. So this study is a step in that direction to help us determine what services the state should be providing to that group of folks.
Very good. Thank you. Any witnesses in opposition? Senator, you have a question?
Well, I would observe, and maybe witnesses can dissuade me, but we've taken some significant and I think long-needed steps in disengaging categorical programs, remanding them to local authorities to make their decisions instead of the State Department of Education and the legislature. And this would, it's certainly something I have sympathy with, and there are other pet categoricals that I really like and defend. But I don't, any categorical that gets this disengagement is going to be back here trying to justify. That's all this is, isn't it?
Well, I would disagree. I think out of all the Tier 3 flexibility programs, adult ed has been the most, the hardest hit. And adult ed is, if you look at all the categoricals, the other categories, all 37 of them, they mostly deal with K-12. This is the only one that actually, this one particular program only deals with adult ed, which is after K-12. So that's the difference.
I understand. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Harkey.
Yeah, I support adult education under normal circumstances. We're not in normal circumstances right now. We've got $20 billion deficits for the next 4 to 5 years, so this situation is not going to improve. And part of our intention in allowing categoricals to be minimized is to allow some flexibility to the school districts to determine where their priorities are. And while I understand what you're saying, we're going to have a gap. I think that if the priority for that district is K through 12, then we'll be hard pressed to step in and say that maybe they ought to not cut the adult education. I do believe that there are other modes of adult education. There are many nonprofit groups. I know the community colleges pick up a lot of slack for adult education, and I appreciate the need for it, but I think we have to allow the school districts to determine where they're going to get their scarce funds, because there are going to be more reductions next year, the year after. And this is not over.
This bill does not eliminate categorical flexibility in any way. This simply asks us to do a study of what's happening with this population and how we should look in the future at dealing with them. Categorical flexibility is still very much in play. This does not change that at all.
Okay.
And additionally, anecdotally, the same level of impact is happening at the community college non-credit program. So the question is, what happens to this population of people that are undertrained and underprepared?
I understand. We've still got to educate the kids, though, and I'm afraid at this time to spend more money for another study isn't going to be another problem. I mean, federal funding, that's, people are starting to rebel against all the federal funding because it's imposing restrictions on the states for receiving it. I'm in sympathy with you, but I think this entire state is going to have some problems, and we really need to quit picking off our special interests and start working together for an overall solution. But I appreciate your efforts. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Harkey. Mr. Cotto.
I want to commend the author for bringing this bill forward, because contrary to what's already been said, it is clear that this state and this nation over the next decade is going to face a serious shortfall of labor. And training is going to be very critical to enabling the population that is served by the adult education program to prepare people for those jobs that are going to be occurring in the future. And I think now's the time that we ought to be doing this on a regular basis anyway. We ought to be looking at our programs on a regular basis anyway to see if they're addressing the need. And I think that's what this one does. So I commend you, and I, of course, would support the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Cotto. Members, any additional questions? Department of Finance, do you have a file on this?
Sorry, Mr. Chairman, no file.
Very good. The item is the suspense candidate. Thank you for your presentation. Looking for Mr. Hill.
Mr. Chair.
Oh, that's right. You have 2363. It's got a due pass recommendation, Mr. Mendoza.
Okay. I'll be brief, Mr. Chair. Members, AB 2363 will create parity with, I think I had a motion, Chair. Should I just go ahead and
continue with your presentation?
I just want to real briefly. We'll create parity for classified employees when charter schools are established. AB 2363 requires at least one half of permanent classified employees estimated to work at a charter school to sign a petition to start a new charter school. This bill also requires at least 50% of permanent classified employees currently employed at the public school to sign a petition to convert an existing school into a charter school. Classified employees play an important role in our education system by assisting special education classes, English learners, and a variety of other duties. and yet they have been excluded from this process, and I think this bill just creates parity. Thank you.
Witnesses in support?
Michelle Castro with the SEIU. We ask for your support. Thank you.
Any additional witnesses in support? Any witnesses in opposition? Department of Finance, do you have a file?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, we are concerned about the bill because we believe it would create a reimbursable state mandate, although the general fund costs would be relatively minor.
Very good. Members, looking for a motion. Oh, it's been moved by Ms. Skinner, seconded by Mr. Hall. That bill is out on a B roll call. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Members.
Mr. Hill, thank you for being here. He's also a member of the committee, right?
Pardon?
Is he a member of the committee?
Hill.
No. Oh, sir. Good morning, sir.
I have 4 bills. AB 1601 and AB 2006 are suspense candidates, and I'm waiving presentation on those 2 items. I will be presenting AB 1767 and AB 2068. AB 1767 authorizes the Medical Board of California to provide legal counsel to their expert reviewer in cases where he or she has a professional grievance filed against them as a result of providing medical expertise for the board. This bill has minor absorbable cost from a special fund. Members, this bill also has bipartisan support. It is sponsored by the Medical Board of California, and Linda Whitney, Interim Executive Director, is here with me today. I respectfully ask for your aye vote.
Very good. Thank you, members. This was previously on consent. Your first witness?
Good morning. Linda Whitney, Interim Executive Director for the Medical Board of California. This is very important to the Medical Board. Our expert reviewers are the first line of reviewing all complaints in terms of consumer protection.
Very good.
We ask for your aye vote.
Bill's been moved and seconded. Any additional witnesses in support? Witnesses in opposition? Department of Finance, do you have a file?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, we have minor and absorbable costs for this.
Very good. The bill's been properly moved and seconded. The bill is out on an A roll call. Thank you, Mr. Hill, for that one.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members. AB 2068, this bill authorizes the court in the interest of justice to expunge the record for a misdemeanor conviction after 1 year of a person who has not received probation. This relief is similar to that provided to specific misdemeanants and felons who have received probation under current law, as well as to misdemeanants who have not received probation and withdraw their plea or have their plea set aside. According to a letter from the Judicial Council, this bill has minor costs that will be absorbable with existing resources. I respectfully ask for your aye vote, Mr. Chair and members.
Thank you, Mr. Hill.
Move it.
Bill's been moved by Mr. Cotto, seconded by Mr. Amiano. Any witnesses in support?
Liberty Sanchez on behalf of the California Public Defenders Association in support of this measure.
Any additional witnesses in support? Witnesses in opposition? Hearing and seeing none. Department of Finance, do you have a file?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, we have minor and absorbable costs for this.
Very good. Thank you. That bill is out on a B roll call, Mr. Hill.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Members, thank you very much for your consideration.
Very good. We are looking for Assembly Members De Leon, Davis, or Bradford to complete our business. Very good. We're being joined by Assemblymember Bradford, but in the meantime, members would entertain a motion to move the consent calendar. Very good. The consent calendar has been properly moved and seconded. There are 3 amendments to 3 items on that consent calendar. It's item 1675, Hagman, item 1800, Ma, and item 2011, Arambula. I'm sorry, and 1874 should be Evans, not Brownlee, on the consent calendar. Very good. So it's been moved and seconded, and all of that is out on an A roll call. Very good. The remaining item is Mr. De La Torre's suspense item. That will remain on suspense, and with that, We'll be adjourning. Members who need to add on, please come to the secretary, and we'll adjourn at that moment. Thank you very much, colleagues, for being on time.